All right, today we're diving into maybe one of the most debated topics there is in all of performance and strength and conditioning. And it's the argument around Olympic movements. Now, when we talk about this argument, we're going to umbrella, unfairly by the way, all Olympic movements into this category, just for the sake of simplicity. Yes, you could argue that, well, this specific variation versus this specific variation, we're just looking at the movements as a whole, just for the sake of simplicity. So before we dive into whether or not I think Olympic movements are useful and whether or not I use them, let's look at the argument for them. Now, the argument typically for Olympic movements are one of two things, and sometimes it's more of one or more of the other, a little bit of both. The first argument you say or hear is, it is an excellent movement to teach triple extension through high power outputs. In other words, it teaches you to extend the ankles, knees, and hips in rhythm under a load that is the bar, which produces high amounts of power, and it's a great tool for doing that. And the other argument is that most Olympic movements or variations have some sort of a catch portion, that is a sticking of it, and that sticking of it requires a rapid production of force in order to, well, stop the bar from crashing to the ground. You have to stop its momentum. In order to stop the velocity of a mass, you have to produce force over a given period of time, which is called impulse. So the argument is, on one hand, it's an excellent. The argument is it's a tool to improve power development, rate of force development, whatever you want to say, through triple extension. Keyword triple extension, because triple extension is what we see in sport. The extension of the ankle, knee, and hip is what typically is responsible for most propulsion we see in sporting activities. Then the other portion is the catching portion. That is the rapid impulse that you have to produce to stop the bar. And that argument's not often made for other reasons, because you could say simply that there might be better options, and that's not even the intended purpose of the movement in the first place. So then you hear this other argument that goes along with Olympic movements, and that is, I teach Olympic movements because I'm not afraid to teach them. I'm not scared to teach them, and I teach them well. Well, the irony of that, if you're teaching, by definition, right, if you're teaching someone to do it, that means that the first time there is a learning curve, right? They don't know how to do it yet. So you have to invest a given unit or units of time in order for this person to perform the movement appropriately. And in theory, only once they perform it perfectly appropriately will you get, well, the perfect stimulus or the intended stimulus that you are trying to apply to the body. For example, if someone does a clean and the clean is done in a poor rhythmic fashion where maybe they extend the knees too early, or they use too much of their low back, or they don't finish the pull, well, you could argue you're not actually getting full triple extension to produce that movement. And that's the teaching portion, right? Olympic movements are Olympic sports, and they're very technical in nature. And so you could say, well, if you don't do the movement appropriately and you're not actually getting triple extension, well, then you're not training triple extension. So that in of itself is my biggest argument against it. If your argument for it is the fact that it teaches triple extension, yet you have to spend time teaching the movement, and in that, there is a learning curve, and certain athletes might learn slower than others, and if they are a slow learner, they are getting less time with the actual triple extension stimulus. Well, then what are we actually trying to accomplish? Because the alternative is, right, the question is there a better alternative to Olympic movements that allow for the athlete to perform triple extension at a near optimal fashion with minimal amounts or needed learning to go on? In other words, is there an option that's out there where they can pick up the movement right away and get the stimulus of triple extension? What about trap bar jumps, loaded jumps? Trap bar jumps done where the athlete simply jumps in the air, jumping, arguably the purest form of triple extension itself. Jumping is arguably what Olympic movements attempt to simulate when it comes to a performance side. The argument is, look, triple extension, it's like jumping. Well, if it's like jumping, why don't we just jump? So you could do variations like trap bar jumps, where I've seen individuals, or even trap bar high pulls, where you're not actually physically leaving the ground, because maybe that's a load that you can't leave the ground with, but a trap bar high pull where you're not having to worry about certain rhythm and timing coordination aspects that come along with the traditional Olympic movements. And the trap bar allows you to vertically propel yourself upward through triple extension. So if your argument is simply triple extension, and there is an alternative out there that has a lower probability of causing someone to miss the stimulus, in other words, that if you look at the odds that someone can learn a trap bar jump faster than that of an Olympic movement, and the odds are higher that they can learn a trap bar jump movement better, quicker, and sooner than an Olympic movement, and both of those entities have, at the end goal, if they both do them perfectly, the same stimulus, then it makes sense for a trap bar jump. Unless your argument is somehow innately an Olympic movement has some special innate something to it that isn't being explained through physics or biomechanics or neuroscience, something that is so innately special to it that a trap bar jump lacks, and if that is justified with evidence, then I'd be willing to change my mind in this argument. But for the time being, until that is proven otherwise, I am going to side with the loaded jump spectrum. And if the argument is, well, you shouldn't land with a loaded jump like that of a trap bar jump, which is a fair argument, but nonetheless, you are catching and landing with in a front rack position of a hang clean, I guess, or you're catching a snatch, which you're landing with it. Yeah, you're in a power position with overhead supports position. You can always use weight crashers or supports, or crash pads I should call them, to dump the weight of the trap bar jump onto, so you're not actually absorbing the impact. But if you want to train, this is part 2 of the argument for Olympic lifting, the catch, you can train the catch by sticking the jump itself with the load. Now, I'm not a huge fan of that personally, because I think there's better options to train that eccentric loading in more maybe sport-specific manner, or even under greater kinetic energy. That would be of a depth jump, which I think has some more practical application when you look at some of the physiological adaptive properties of that movement, but that's neither here nor there. So that's my argument against Olympic movements. I'm not against them, actually. Well, I just said I'm against them. I am not opposed to anyone using them. It is not my time and place to say whether or not you should or should not use an Olympic movement. And I honestly don't care a whole bunch what you do from a training standpoint. However, I have to justify to individuals I work with as to why I don't use Olympic movements, and that's my justification as to why I don't. And why I program other loaded jumps instead, and why I tend to favor other loaded jumps instead. So that's my reasoning. I hope you all enjoy. I appreciate you guys giving me this suggestion here. As always, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Comment below what you think. And if there's someone who wants to talk about this in more detail, who is an Olympic movement advocate, I'd be happy to hop on a discussion and learn from what you think is best and why. And again, as always, I appreciate you guys listening. Hope you enjoy, and stay tuned for upcoming ones in the future.